This video was brought to you by Brilliant, and the first 200 people to use the link below will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. We're now nearly 3 months into the war in Ukraine, and the war is beginning to look more and more like a stalemate. While there have been some significant developments in Kharkiv and Mariupol, the main Russian advance in Donbass has slowed to a snail's pace, and the frantic atmosphere that characterized the beginning of this war has now definitely subsided. So in this video, we'll be taking a look at the most recent developments in Ukraine, what might happen next, and the prospect of a ceasefire in the near future. So let's start off with the biggest development of the last week, the surrender of Mariupol. Mariupol is a city that's been under siege for the best part of 3 months, and it's home to the infamous Azov Battalion, who we've covered in detail in this video. Despite being wildly outnumbered, a few weeks ago there were 5 to 10 times as many Russian soldiers as Ukrainians deployed in Mariupol. Ukrainian forces had been able to hold out in the Azov steelworks until Monday. But in the past few days, nearly 1,000 Ukrainian forces have surrendered to the Russian army in Mariupol and have been sent to prison colonies on Russian-controlled territory, according to Russia's foreign ministry. While Russia originally suggested that they would be used for prisoner of war exchanges, there have been reports that some soldiers have been transferred to a Russian detainment facility to face extremism charges in a military court, with their crime being fighting for the Azov regiment. The Ukrainian government has claimed that some soldiers have refused to surrender to Russia, and that an international evacuation mission was ongoing. But for the most part, it looks like Mariupol has essentially fallen, giving Russia their much-desired land bridge to Crimea. However, according to the head of the Donetsk People's Republic, 60% of residential houses in Mariupol are damaged beyond repair, and will therefore have to be demolished entirely. With the leader saying that the Azov steelworks, which were also badly damaged, are going to be replaced with a park. However, the Donetsk People's Republic do say they plan to rebuild another iron and steel works, which was also damaged in the fighting. Anyway, you get the idea. Mariupol has finally fallen. And while this might put a dent in Ukrainian morale, they should be buoyed by the fact that Ukraine has essentially won the battle for Kharkiv. Ukrainian forces have pushed the Russian army all the way back to the border and are now apparently making progress towards Belgorod, which is about 40 kilometers within Russia, with these moves damaging supply lines moving from Belgorod to Russian troops in Donbass. Also, this may all be part of a Ukrainian strategy to reach Vovchansk, a town some 50 kilometers northeast of Kharkiv, where they could establish a permanent bridgehead on the east side of the Donetsk River, allowing them to attack Russian forces to the south. Even if the Ukrainians don't make it that far though, chances are that Russia will have to redeploy some of its forces in Izium to prevent further Ukrainian advances towards supply lines running from Belgorod to Izium, which, if successful, would weaken their firepower in Donbass. Ukrainian forces have apparently made some advances towards Kherson, but they're a good 50 kilometers away from the city, and satellite data suggests that the Russian army have established defensive positions around the city, with trenches and concrete bunkers. Both sides have also spent the last few days shelling each other, and a stalemate in the region now looks likely. So that's how things are going in Mariupol, Kharkiv and Kherson, but what about the main offensive in Donbass? Well, the Russian army are making some progress, but they're advancing remarkably slowly, and at this rate, the war will drag on for months. At the moment, Russian forces are apparently focused on 2 towns, Lyman and Popasma, presumably in anticipation of a small pincer movement around Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. However, Russian forces have made no further progress south from Izium, suggesting that they're going for a smaller, less significant pincer movement than the one many expected a few weeks ago. Russian forces did capture Popasna last week though, and have slowly advanced northwest from there, capturing another town on Wednesday. Unfortunately for Putin, however, Russian forces have so far been unable to capture the heavily fortified town of Lyman, despite surrounding it on 3 sides. So you get the idea. Russia's army is moving pretty slowly and has yet again revised down its objectives, at least in the near term. So it seems that the war is now dominated by grinding artillery duels rather than swift mechanized offensives. So a stalemate is now looking more likely than ever. Ultimately, this state of affairs might explain the recent calls by European leaders like Macron and Schulz to Putin, calling for renewed negotiations. That's because both Putin and Zelensky have less of an incentive than ever before to continue the war, because substantial shifts in territory look unlikely at this point. There's actually a term for this in the academic literature, a mutually hurting stalemate, where both parties are suffering for no gain, which is also the time that both sides are most incentivized to agree to a ceasefire. Nonetheless, whatever the game theory suggests, a negotiated settlement does still look unlikely. Negotiations between the two sides collapsed entirely on Monday and haven't restored since. And this is partly because, whatever the facts on the ground, not everyone thinks that a stalemate is inevitable. Some Ukrainian officials are apparently optimistic about the prospect of a complete Ukrainian victory. In fact, in an interview with Sky News on May 14th, Ukraine's military intelligence chief claimed somewhat optimistically that Ukraine would recapture Donbass and Crimea by mid-August. While on Friday, an advisor to Zelensky chided the Italian Prime Minister's calls for an urgent ceasefire to help Ukrainian grain exports and renew negotiations, claiming that no ceasefire would be possible until Russia had withdrawn all of its troops from Ukraine. Similarly, Russian state media has gone into a frenzy since the capture of Mariupol, framing it as proof that Russia will eventually prevail. The Russians are also probably being resistant because this isn't an acceptable opening negotiating position for Putin. The Russians haven't been able to take all of Donetsk, let alone Kyiv. So Putin knows that if he goes into a negotiation now, his hand will be a lot weaker than he once hoped. So if a ceasefire isn't on the cards, then what happens next? Well, there are basically 2 options from this point. A grinding war of attrition that drags on for months, or some sort of Russian escalation, probably with nuclear or chemical weapons. And neither are great options for, well, anyone. But until and unless the two sides decide to negotiate, that's essentially all we have left. And one last thing. This video was brought to you by Brilliant. Brilliant is an online STEM learning platform that teaches you everything you need to know to better understand the modern world. Baffled by investment and finance? Well, they've got courses on maths and quantitative finance. Confused by coding? Well, they've got everything from the very basics right through to quantum computing. Unclear why you're losing millions? Well, there's no guarantee that Brilliant can help with that, but they do have courses on cryptocurrency and gambling. You get the point. Everything you want to learn about STEM is covered by Brilliant. And the best thing is that all of their courses are designed by award-winning instructors and built upon the principle of active learning. So you're gaining STEM knowledge by actually doing it. So if you want to improve with STEM, then you can sign up to Brilliant at brilliant.org/TLDR EU. And the first 200 people to do so will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for supporting the channel.